Well, it's a great day to be in church, yes? We're so glad that you are here today. I want to welcome those of you who are joining us online. If you're out in the foyer, can we welcome our Branchville Correctional Facility campus as well? Good morning, gentlemen. Love you. Love what God is doing at Branchville. If you're a guest here with us, maybe for the first time, in the seat back pocket in front of you, there's a card that says guest welcome with a QR code on it. If you scan it, fill it out, we've got a gift to give you at the cafe. If you don't want anybody to know you were here, don't do anything. And no one will bother you. 2 weeks from now is Baptism Sunday. If you have not been baptized by your own choosing, we don't believe in infant baptism because you did not make that personal choice yourself. So if you have never been baptized of your own choosing, we want to encourage you to do so. The 14th of July, 2 Sundays from today, you can sign up to get baptized at thehillschurch.com. It'll be awesome. We also need your help getting suitcases for Cuba. Now we've got 2,000 meds ready to go, 2,000 pounds of medication ready to go, thanks to your generosity. And we just need large suitcases. So if you have some and you're like, hey, I'm willing to send them. If you have some and we need to bring it back, we can do that as well. So just leave your name on it. We'll get it back to you. It will just have gone to Cuba and spent some time there in the sun. So if you can do that, that'd be awesome. Tonight is an all worship night. Starting at 6 p.m., you don't want to miss it. It's going to be an incredible night. You don't have to hear from me, so it'll be good. I want you to yell out the first car you ever had. Hit me with it. First car you ever had. Corolla. What was in the back? Oldsmobile 9.8. Never heard of it. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my first car. My first car was a Ford Pinto. Beautiful Ford Pinto. It was awesome. It was awesome. And when I was given this Ford Pinto, it had already had 3 owners in my family, and I was the 4th owner now of the Ford Pinto. It had no floorboard on the passenger side. And if you wanted to throw anything away, it was awesome because as you were driving, you could just chuck things. And it was kind of like Mario Kart type deal. So you didn't have to worry about that. But when they gave me the car, all I knew about cars was they need gas to run. All the lights on the dash were already all lit all the time. So there's no indications that or anything wrong. So I drove that for about 2 years, and one day it just stopped. And when I took it to the mechanic, he's like, hey, what do you think's wrong with it? I was like, I have no idea. I put $1.50 worth of gas in here a day ago, so I don't know what's going on. He's like, well, you're not out of gas. He's like, you're out of oil. You don't have any oil in here. I was like, well, who puts oil in a car? He's like, it comes with oil. I was like, I don't have an oil leak. He's like, well, you're supposed to get it changed every so often. I was like, you Americans trying to rip people off. I was like, I've been to Cuba. They don't have to change their oil. And it turns out it's true. You're supposed to change your oil because I fried the engine. So the guy's like, it'll be about $200. I was like, okay, I'll come back. Well, I didn't ever come back. So the Ford Pinto's still there. And you need to understand this about cars and life. You need to, before they burn up or die out, you need to keep a close eye on the gauges. And we're in week 2 of our series, Weeds in My Garden, where we take a look at some of the dark subjects talked about in Scripture, like anxiety, depression, suicide, trauma, and grief. But mental health issues like anxiety and depression are on the rise, so much so that in 6 countries, they took a survey, a study, and they studied 10,000 people from all 6 countries, including the U.S. and the United Kingdom. And here's what they found out. 42% of people reported symptoms of burnout. Nearly half the people in this room then would be stressed to the max. If I say, hey, how many of you are on the verge of burning out? How many of you would raise your hand? Okay, there's just a few of us getting ready to panic. Thank you. One of our worship team members is joining us. The good news is there's a better way to live. And God invites us to a healthy way of living. And today we're going to dig into a guy story named Elijah. Many of you know him. He's an Old Testament prophet. But we're going to go through the book of 1 Kings. And in this book of 1 Kings and 2 Kings, they're all about kings. kings of the Old Testament, and you've got all kinds of kings in here. You've got King Saul, King David, King Solomon, Rehoboam, and so many more. Most all of them, not all of them, but most of them were terrible people and terrible leaders and did terrible things to God's people. So God would raise up prophets to tell the kings what they should do in order to right the kingdom, to get it going in the right way. And during King Ahab's reign, he's got a wife named Jezebel. They have a prophet that will come to speak to them, Elijah. Now, severe famine and violence and uncertainty has reigned in this kingdom the entire time. And in order to understand where we are in chapter 19, so if you have your Bible, turn to 1 Kings chapter 19, that's where we're going to go. You need to know what happens in chapter 18. In chapter 18, Elijah has finally had it with Jezebel and all her fake gods that she keeps making. She goes and literally carves a god for herself, calls it Baal, says everybody should worship them. The way you would worship Baal is by putting your children on altars and letting them sacrifice your children to this god. And then they would cut themselves and do all kinds of craziness, and Elijah's like, you should not kill anybody. He's like, so bring all of your prophets of Baal, and we'll have a test. He tells the people very clearly, right, in this passage right here, in 1 Kings chapter 18, Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you hesitate between your two options? The Lord is your God, follow him, but if Baal is, follow him. But the people did not answer. So they go up on Mount Carmel, and while they're up there, he goes, we're going to have a showdown of gods. We're going to do a beat Bobby Flay God edition. So you go over there and you build an altar to your God and try to call down fire. And over here, I'm going to build an altar to my God, and then I will call down fire. So he goes, now you go first. So he lets them go at it for 6 hours. They're hooping, they're shouting, they're cutting themselves, they're sacrificing things. Nothing is happening. And you know, he does what any good godly man would do at that point. He starts mocking them. He's like, maybe your God is asleep. Maybe he's in the bathroom. Maybe he's busy. Maybe he doesn't exist. And he's kind of laughing, and he's super bold and courageous. And then he goes, hey, it's my turn, and it's now been 9.5 hours. It's my turn. He tells his servant to go get pails of water to pour it over the wood to fill up the trench. And then he prays a very simple prayer, and fire from heaven comes down, consumes all the wood, and then a tongue of fire actually comes and laps up all the water in the trench. And he goes, clearly, you can see who's in charge. Now, the prophets of Baal, like, everybody looks at them and goes, you're wrong. And again, we do what all good Christians do. We kill our opponents. So he kills all 100 prophets of Baal. And that's where we pick up his story in verse 19. 1 Kings 19, chapter 1. Now, Ahab, the king, who witnessed the killing of all these prophets, told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so may the gods do to me even more if I do not make your life like that of one of them by tomorrow at this time. And he, Elijah, was afraid and arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. Now, if you know Jezebel, how many of you know somebody named Jezebel? Raise your hand. There's a good reason for that. Now, it doesn't mean that Jezebels that you meet today are bad people. You can know somebody named Jezebel, and that doesn't mean they're bad people. But it's the equivalent to naming your child Hitler back in the day. That was not a good thing. People would be like, oh, she was a vicious woman. She literally would go around trying to kill people. And if she were made into a Tyler Perry film, it'd be Diaries of a Mad Black Israeli Woman. Like, she would be going nuts. And this is the way she dealt with everything. She sees everything that's going down. She's mad and she can't take it. He has killed all of her cronies. Elijah, who is a super great guy, super amazing prophet, freaks out. He's like, she wants to kill me. So what does he do? He turns into Forrest Gump and he runs 100 miles. 100 miles away. How scared do you have to be of one woman that you take off on foot for 100 miles? So think about that. That's how nasty this woman was and her reputation for getting what she wanted. But a lot of us, we can judge him, but a lot of us have the same thing. We have spiritual amnesia. When God does something great and powerful in our lives, we tend to forget it when we go through the next thing. We're like, well, God's not going to show up. So God shows up, rains down fire from heaven, which he's used to doing. He would call bears out and they would come, and he would slap the water and the water would part. So he's used to that. What he's not used to is somebody threatening his life. Now he just takes off running. And as exhaustion set in, the clouds set in, he kind of has this moment that many of us have when we do something great for God. We go, God, in chapter 18, I did great things for you. So you owe me a calm chapter 19. You owe me some peace in my life. But that's not what's happening here. That's clearly what's not happening. So we see this happen next to Elijah. But he himself went on a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree and requested for himself that he might die. And said, it is enough now, O Lord, just take my life, for I'm not better off than my fathers. He's run 100 miles. He's depressed. He's anxious. He's got fatigue, insomnia, sadness, emptiness, and he's hopeless. And he's like, God's not here. I don't know if you've ever been there in your life where you're just out of gas, you're out of energy, you're out of spiritualness, you're out of it all. You're like, God is not here with me. I'm by myself. And we need to identify the potential causes to what leads to burnout so that we don't just deal with the symptoms. Many times we just deal with the symptoms of things. You ever been annoyed at a doctor because they just deal with symptoms? You go to the doctor's office, you're like, I am coughing. It hurts when I cough. And he's like, well, I'm going to give you this. In 4 days, you'll feel better. I'm like, no, I want to feel better today. Not 4 days, today. Or they go to your back and they're like, you need to go to therapy. It'll take 6 months. You'll feel better. And I'm like, I don't think you understood. I hurt right now. I want you to shoot me right here with whatever they give people at debates. Put it right here, okay? And I want to be able to walk out of here, right? And that's not what happens because doctors don't deal in symptoms. They're trying to find the root cause. And the root cause can often be scary, but if you get out the problem, then you're healed. So we want to examine these spiritual gazes. We want to deal with this, and the way to do this is this. This acronym, you may have heard this in the ruthless elimination of hurry, these RPMs gauge, gauging where you are in different areas of your life. These are the RPMs. It's relationally, physically, mentally, and spiritually. You have to keep track of all those gauges. So the first one is relationally, right? How's Elijah doing in this moment? Jezebel's out to kill him. He's not in a very healthy place. He's not responding in the very healthiest way. He isolates himself. He actually tells his servant, the guy who goes with him everywhere, stay here, I'm going off by myself. And many times when we are struggling, we isolate ourselves from everybody else. When we need people the most, we leave. We are compared to, in the Bible, sheep, the devil, wolves. Sheep, the way they stay protected is to travel in herds. They're herd animals, right? So they stay in their little flock, and so you stay there and you're safe. If you are by yourself, the odds of you being attacked go way up, and the odds of you being able to defend yourself go way down. We were not designed to live outside of that community. So when those attacks come through, you start going, well, nobody knows what I'm going through. If they knew, they would just judge me, because you've isolated. And when you're so far apart, your despair sinks in. And too many times when we start struggling, we take ourselves out and you start feeling hopeless, depressed, and too anxious to call anybody, too nervous to tell them what's going on. Can I be honest with you that Satan would love nothing more than to get the idea of suicide to go through your head? to destroy. We know that he exists to kill and destroy. Like, that's his message. When I was 25 years old, I'd been married for 5 years, and I was a pastor, and we had a huge youth ministry of about 1,000 kids, and I was the associate youth pastor there, and I loved what I did, but I was working all the time, and I would catch myself being alone. And then at home, you know, when people don't tell you when you first get married, even if you marry the most perfect person in the whole world, which my wife is, it's not easy, because I have to deal with somebody else besides myself. I had a hard time taking care of myself, let alone somebody else, and I wasn't good at it. And so here we are, we're newly married, a kid's on the way, I'm working all the time, I'm stressed out, people tell me all the problems, and finally in one day, I just get one day off, and I start talking to myself. I can remember as clear as day. I'm like, nobody cares. If they care, they would help. If they understood, they'd be here. They're not here. They don't want to help me. I was like, this isn't worth it, God. And I had a bottle of pills that I take. I was like, I'm just going to take them all. So I just put them on my lips, and I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. It's not worth it. I'm tired of feeling this way, God. And something just, in my heart, I was just like, this isn't right. And the next day, I went and I told my boss, I was like, hey, like, here's what I almost did yesterday. It scared me, and I had really dark thoughts. And here's what you need to understand. You're never alone. You are part of a flock of people that care so deeply about you that would show up at any moment. And don't believe a lie that you're alone. There's always somebody willing to talk to you. There's always somebody willing to be there for you. Don't buy it. It's not worth it. You would be missed. And the world would not be better off without you. Don't buy it. The second thing we need to gauge is our physical nature. We need to gauge what's going on. So how's Elijah doing physically? He's exhausted. He's living in a time of famine, and he's hungry, and Elijah is trying to do everything in his own power. You know, we make it really simple, you know, if we just think if we eat healthy and we sleep well and we exercise, things are going to go well. But the God's honest truth, we have so many things that take us away from the simplicity of life, we don't do the simple things, right? We complain about our children being on social media too much. But the truth is, a lot of us are on social media too much. Wasting time. We watch too much television. Spending way too much engaging in those things. And then the food we eat is not great for us. And I'm guilty. I'm not pointing, you know, like if I go to Taco Bell, I can't go anywhere else afterward. Like, I know it's not safe for anybody. Basic human needs like food and sleep have a powerful impact. So let me ask you this. If you were to take a self-assessment, how are you doing physically? What I love about God is God's not just up there going, hey, I only care about what you do for the church, for the kingdom. That's all I care about. As a matter of fact, that's not it at all. God cares about everything you're going through, and he wants to deal with the small things that you don't even think he cares about. How do I know that? Well, we find that next in his story. It says in 1 Kings 19:7, the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and he ate and drank. If God cares this much, you're so hungry that God feeds you. He's like, right now, more than a pep talk, more than anything else, you just need to eat something. See, if you're talking about Hebrew culture and Hebrew language, there are no exclamation points. So if you had to emphasize it, you had to repeat it often. So a lot of times you're like, man, the Bible says things a lot, over and over and over again. Yeah, that's because they're repeating things. So in Matthew chapter 6, your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and this righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. What are those things? Food, water, shelter, health, mental, physical, all of it will be given to you to take care of you. So let me ask you again, how are you doing physically? How's your health? How are your finances? How are you doing with your provision? God doesn't just care about what you do for him. He cares about you as an individual. And burnout comes when you don't understand where hope comes from. Hope is found in Jesus. Jesus and hopelessness cannot coexist. One is based on truth, the other one is not. The other thing we've got to work on, engage, is our mentality. How are we doing mentally? You know, you ever met a mom that's losing her mind with her children? You know, I don't think I could ever be a mom, I'll be honest. I struggle being a dad, and we're like second place. You know, I'm like, I listen to the questions asked my wife. I'm like, I can't answer that. I've got no idea. Thank God you're here. But moms, I remember my boss's wife back in Florida, they have 5 kids, and I had to deliver something to her house, and I just knock on the door, and she opens the door, and everybody, all the children are crying. And she just says, "Welcome to hell." And she's like, "I just hit all of them. I couldn't take it. I just snapped and I beat everybody in the house. Would you like to stay?" And I'm like, "No. Here you go. I really need to go now. Thank you very much." And at some point, your brain gets physically exhausted of handling things. And that's where God does something amazing here. It says, strengthened by the food, he traveled for 40 days. So he eats 40 days, 40 nights, finishing this 100-mile trek, reaches Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. What's incredible is Mount Horeb is a peak of a mountain range. This other peak is Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is where Moses gets the 10 Commandments. Where Moses goes into the cave, and if you've ever watched The Prince of Egypt, the scene where they're in the cave and God starts speaking to him, "I am the son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Take off your sandals, for the place you stand is holy ground." Same cave. Now Elijah's in that cave. And God's going, hey, Elijah, I'm worried about how you're doing here, buddy. I'm worried about what you're thinking here. So here's what God does for him. He says, and the word of the Lord came to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" "I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put to death all the prophets by the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." See, one of the problems with our mentality is we start to have like an altered state. So in our altered state, we start to think God has left us, God doesn't care about us, I'm the only one. In a book that I read a portion of, I didn't read the entire thing, but this leadership and self-discipline book, it had an illustration talking about a dad with a brand new baby, and everybody in the house had gone to bed, and him and his wife are sleeping in the bed, and the baby starts crying. And he thinks to himself, I should get up and get this baby. Then the next thought he has is, well, if I don't get up, my wife will get up and get the baby. The baby continues to cry, and then the next thought he has is, she's not waking up to get the baby. I should just move around a little bit, try to wake her up enough to go get the baby. She still doesn't wake up. The baby continues to cry, and he says, hey, does she not know how important I am to this family? Does she not know how much work I do? She must not care about me, yet the baby continues to cry. And then he's like, she's not a good mother. She should just get up and know her place. All up here. Not real. We think we're alone. We think we're the only person who cares. And God's up there going, no, you're not alone. Even when you think you're alone. Elijah literally thinks he's the last prophet left. He's like, Jezebel's killed everybody else, Jesus. I'm on my own. If we go back one chapter, it says, well, Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets. It was happening. Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplies for them with food and water. So even when he thought he was alone, God had a plan for him. Eventually, he has a spiritual awakening. And we see this here. There it is. 1 Kings 19. The Lord said, go and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart, shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind was there, the earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came, a gentle whisper came. See, I told you earlier that when big events happen, when we're going through tough financial times and tornadoes happen and hurricanes happen and natural disasters happen and the pandemic happens, we tend to think that nobody is with us. When the truth of the matter, God says, I have been making a plan for you to prosper the whole time. I've been looking out for you. Even when you were burning out, I was there for you. Even when you didn't know what to do, I was there for you. The last 4 years of my life have been incredibly tough. I lived on burnout edges for such a long time. I didn't even know what to do. I remember in 2019, we get a phone call in March and we're like, hey, you're going to have to close the church. We got some thing going rampant in the nation. You just need to close. I'm like, oh, okay. October that same year, we have a leadership change. We go from 900 people down to 200. I'm like, okay. A few days later, I get a call saying, hey, you owe $350,000. You need to pay by December 1st. Okay, God, you're not with me. January 10th, my hero, my rock in life, my grandfather passes away from COVID. I finally come back, everything's falling apart, and I go, you know what, God, you must not be with me. Feeling, woe is me, I'm the only one. I get to March, and my son gets a diagnosis that he's got a cyst on his pituitary gland that requires a full craniotomy, a full brain surgery. I'm like, okay, God, well, what else? I'm starting to look at myself going, I'm doing something wrong. I must have sin in my life. I'm the only person going through this. We round the horn. He has his surgery, and then a couple weeks later, it's revealed he's not producing any cortisol, so he's got to go back in for a little bit. Then he comes back out. The church isn't growing. No one will give us a loan. Every person we try to get a loan from is like, no. I'm like, Lord, you're not with me. We finally start moving. Some things start getting good halfway. One day I'm preaching and I'm having a hard time catching my breath, and so I go to the doctor the next day. I tell him my symptoms, and he's like, good news. He goes here, so he's kind of a jerk to me. He's like, good news is you don't have bronchitis and you don't have pneumonia. You have something much worse. I don't know what it is, though. I'm excited to find out. And he's like, it's huge, man. It's in your throat and it's massive. He's like, it's 10 inches and it's stuck in there. I had a massive goiter in my neck. It was smashing my vocal cords, and so, you know, they set me up for surgery. They sliced me open right here. I tell people I've had my head severed. Right before that surgery, they go, hey, by the way, we're going to have to cut your vocal cords. I was like, I speak for a living. I'm like, God is not with me. But God. In a cave, there was you, who had been preparing the whole time to come out and go, no, we've got you. You're not alone. There are men and women of God who are going to stand beside you. We're going to help. You're not alone. You are never alone. You thought you were alone because you were tired. You were this. And I go, I finally get what Jesus was asking me to do. And I just go, you know what, God? I'm just going to pray. I'm tired of trying to do this by myself. I've used every power. And so I just tell the staff, we're just going to pray every day. And all of a sudden, people just start coming out of the woodworks, and people are like, how are you doing? I'm like, I have no idea. But I know this. My God has never left me nor forsaken me, and he doesn't have the ability to do it. He's already promised that when you are closest to burnout, he is closer to you then than at any other point. He is close to the brokenhearted. And when the Bible uses that term, in the Greek it says they share a table. So while you're brokenhearted, your God is sitting across the table from you, listening. Even when you can't hear him, he's listening to what you're saying. He's close to the brokenhearted. He will never leave you nor forsake you. So check your gauges and go, I might not be doing good physically. I might not be doing good relationally. I might not be doing good mentally, and I might not be doing good spiritually. I would tell you, you are in the best position. You're like, but Pastor Joe, you don't understand. I need a miracle. And I'm telling you that the best place to be for a miracle is right where you're sitting, in the middle of your mess. Because everybody wants a miracle. Nobody wants to be in a position where they need one. But God will supply all your needs according to his riches and glory. Will you stand with me across this place? If you'd say today, Pastor Darryl, I'm just struggling with burnout. Again, we're not here to look at you. We're not here to do anything crazy. We just want to pray for you up front. If you're like, Pastor Darryl, I feel hopeless right now. Hopelessness and Jesus cannot coexist. Why? Because God is truth. He's not a feeling. If God were a feeling, he would change. For your God has never changed. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He's not a feeling. If you never feel God again, he's still real. Why? Because he never identifies himself as a feeling. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The truth is all he is. I am always there. I am incapable of breaking my word. So these altars have been filled all morning long with people that just wanted to go, you know what, God, I'm almost at my tipping point. I need help. As we sing today, if you need prayer, please just come forward. We're not going to make a spectacle out of you.